This is Tanya Pearson interviewing Freda Payne on June 21st, 2018 in California for the Women of Rock Oral History Project. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. We are all thrilled to meet you.
Thank you.
So like I said, this is a personal and professional biography. We start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the city of Detroit, Michigan.
What did your parents do for a living? What was your relationship like with them?
Well, my mother divorced my father, Freda Payne, when I was 3.5. And of course, my sister, I guess she's 2 years my junior almost. So I guess she was like about 1.5 or something like that. Yeah. And my mother remarried when I was 6 to Mr. Samuel Farley, and we sort of like grew up as kids and into our teens, adding his name onto our name. So I was Freda Payne Farley, and articles that when I had articles written up about me in the Free Press or the Detroit News or the infamous Michigan Chronicle, which was the black paper, and it covered all the activities and things going on with people in our community, the African American people in our community, in our city. And of course, they always wrote a lot of, different things about me and my sister as well. It was sort of like a social thing, especially in the social columns. My mother remained married to my stepfather until her transition when she passed away in 1977.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. But I had a pretty, it's sort of like when I think about people like I've been doing the life of Ella Fitzgerald for the last 14 years, maybe 15 years, and I have, in reading up on her biography, I've seen where she had a difficult childhood and a lot of trauma in it as well, and especially in her teens. It really jumped off in her teens. But I never had any. I was a pretty good girl until I left Detroit.
I want to go back just for a second because you mentioned your sister Sherry Payne.
Right.
Do you have any other siblings?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it was just the two of us growing up. And
your sister ended up singing.
My sister Sherry ended up being a member of the Supremes, the Supremes.
Just a little group,
that's known all over the world and had multiple million seller records and where the Diana Ross came from, but anyway, Sherry was hired back in the 70s when Jean Terrell left the group. Jean Terrell was the lead singer who replaced Diana Ross. Mm-hmm. And so Jean stayed for a while, and she got about 4 or 5 hits under her belt as the lead singer with the Supremes. And then they hired Sherry. Mary Wilson hired Sherry Payne, and Sherry was hired as a lead singer because she's quite a good singer. And so was Mary Wilson, by the way. And it was Sherry, Mary, and Cindy Birdsong. And then after, I think, a year or two, Cindy left the group, and they brought on a young lady who was extremely talented by the name of Susie Green, she's more like a soprano, has that kind of a high voice, and she's a great songwriter. As a matter of fact, she's co-written songs with Stevie Wonder. And she used to sing with Stevie Wonder prior to being hired to become a Supreme.
What kind of kid? Well, you said that you were a goody two shoes. I think you said.
You know what? I kind of let me kind of justify that. What I meant was I wasn't like a fast girl. Back then. There are girls in school, like you're in middle school, high school. There are girls who were considered fast. They were doing things that you wouldn't do yet. You probably did it later on after you. But you know what I mean. I wasn't fast. I was basically, pretty well-rounded when I think back on it. I have to tell you, though, during my puberty years, I was a very shy girl. I was extremely shy. I didn't even know I had talent until I was about 12 and a half. And that was because my piano teacher, Ruth Ann Johnson, discovered it when she said, Freda, I want to try your voice out for our next piano recital. And I want to see if you're good enough to be in a group of 6. And she tried my voice out. She says, you have a lovely voice. She says, I'm going to give you a solo. And so she gave me a solo. And then after the concert that day, my mother's friends all gathered around and said, oh, we didn't know Freda could sing. When you said Freda was going to sing, we thought you were really talking about Sherry. Because Sherry was the one that was the outgoing one. She was the one that was gregarious and wanted to entertain the relatives when they'd come over and, that kind of thing. And I wasn't. And I was a tomboy. So, yeah, I was a tomboy up until I was about 12. Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Well, you know what? It changed once I started developing, because then it was like I had to fight the boys off. I had to fight the boys off, and I mean that literally and figuratively. And then I kind of at first I kind of really hated coming, having breasts and stuff like that. And then after a while, I started to realize it was an asset. And it was something to be proud of, and not to be, bemoaning about.
Yeah, you kind of answered my next question. So you sort of found out you could sing by accident, but you played instruments before you started singing?
Yes, I did. Both my sister and I, we had piano lessons from the time we were I think I started, my mother took me for piano lessons first. It was at the Detroit Institute of Musical Arts in Detroit. And that was we did that for, it wasn't quite a year. And then she found that lady, her name is Ruth Ann Johnson, who came to the house and she gave piano lessons to my sister and I. So, and then also for one semester, I took violin in grade school. I think it was the 5th or the 6th grade. And then I lost interest because I had a violin and everything. My mother went and bought me a violin. And I took violin lessons at school, public school. I went to public schools in Detroit.
And so creativity sounds like something that was encouraged by your mother. And
she basically was into culture. She wanted us to be cultured. And my mother was quite a person. When I think back on her, she was a real lady. She never cursed. And she, of course, she got angry, but she never used curse words, or like some mothers and some people do today, very freely. And that carries over to the kids, But my mother was quite the lady, and she was very, very bright.
I grew up with a cursing mother.
Oh!
Yes. Yeah, well, we talked about briefly before we started the interview, but you started out as a jazz artist or a jazz singer?
How it happened was this. I was 12 when I would listen to the radio, especially late at night when I was supposed to be sleeping. There was a radio that was right above my bed. I had it was like a twin bed, and there was a little shelf there, and there was a little radio. I had a radio, and I would listen to it at night, and I would listen to this station because for some reason I wasn't really crazy about rock and roll music at that time. Later on I got to get into it, but I was listening to a radio station, and I'll tell you the artist. It was like Chet Baker, June Christie, Chris Connor, Julie London, Ella Fitzgerald, Carmen McRae, Sarah Vaughan, and I would just listen to these, and the DJ would play all these songs, and I was fascinated by these songs, and I actually started, kind of ingesting and learning these songs myself. And then when I sang at my piano recital, I started to enter talent contests, because then it kind of like opened up something in my perspective. And I started to enter talent contests, local basic contests, and I would win. Sometimes I'd win first place, sometimes second place. And then I entered a contest that was on TV locally. It was on NBC, Channel 4 affiliated, and it was called the Ed McKenzie's Dance Hour. And Ed McKenzie was sort of like the Dick Clark of Detroit. And he had teens come on, and they would dance to the latest pop songs and rock songs. And then also they featured a celebrity, whoever was appearing at the top nightclubs in Detroit. Like the Flame Show Bar, it would be like Adela Reese or somebody like that. Or it would be like a Dizzy Gillespie or somebody, or Sammy Davis Jr., who was appearing at the Elmwood Casino, which was right across the river in Canada, in Windsor. And they had Sammy on one day. And well, anyway, the first time I went on, I was 13. I was 13 years old. And here's the funny part. When I auditioned to be a dancer. I danced. And they accepted me to be on the contest as a dancer. Well, I had this feeling that came over me afterwards, and I said, you know what? I think I might do better singing. And my mother called them up and said, is it okay if my daughter sings? And they said, okay. So I sang and I won. And ironically, that's exactly what happened with Ella Fitzgerald. When she entered her first talent contest at the Apollo in Harlem, she entered as a dancer, but then she froze and she decided that the other dancers who were on the show as well, she saw that they were better than her. And she changed her mind and wound up singing and won.
Wow, so there's so many.
It was similar.
Parallels.
It was very similar. So after I won that contest, about 6 months later, they called me back to enter the contest again, and I won the second time. So that kind of like really got me going, and it made me a little more popular at school, and I started to, and so I was 13. So by the time I turned 14. There was a radio show, and it was called Don Large's Make Way for Youth. And it was, the station was WJR, and it was located inside the Fisher Building. The Fisher Building was right across the street from General Motors building. And the Fisher Building, although General Motors is no longer housed in that building complex, the Fisher Building is still there, and it's quite a structure. And the WJR was located in the penthouse of the Fisher Building. And also the Fisher Building had a theater a movie theater in it and everything. The theater is still there, but now it's not a movie theater. It's, it's for shows and things like that. But the show featured a chorus. It was a chorus. And of course you had to audition for it, and you had to be a good sight reader. Or else you could be a great singer, but if you weren't a good sight reader, you weren't going to get in. By that time, I was in high school by then. And I auditioned, and I became a member of Make Way for Youth. And Don Large started to feature me as a soloist quite frequently. It was me and another girl by the name of Ursula Walker. Ursula is like about a couple of years older than me, and Ursula used to be on TV a lot singing. And this was before when I was like looking up to her, is like, oh God, I want to be as good as Ursula. I want to sing as good as Ursula. That's exactly that was my frame of mind back then. So Ursula was also in the group with Don Large's Make Way for Youth. So we were basically almost the only two he gave solos to that I can recall. Now, if I'm mistaken, sorry. But there may have been some male singers, like a male singer, like a baritone or a tenor. He gave solos to them too sometimes. And that kind of really got me going. And then, of course, I had my encounter with Barry Gordy Jr. as well when I was 14. Unfortunately, nothing ever happened with Barry because my mother, in negotiating with him, he wanted to manage me, and my mother wouldn't concede to what he wanted, and he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't budge from his platform, and she wouldn't budge from her platform, and nothing happened. But Barry wanted to sign me as an artist. As a matter of fact, he'll say out of his own mouth, and I was surprised that he said it. He said, Freda was my first artist, my first female artist. And he said, she's the one that inspired me to see what I had to do.
Yeah, I was wondering why because you'd never signed to Motown, but you had that relationship.
I had that relationship.
Yeah.
And of course, my mother knew the Gordys. The Gordys belonged to the same church as we belonged to, Bethel AME. And my mother had even worked for Barry's parents when they owned a grocery store back when she was 17. And so my mother knew. It was sort of like everybody knew everybody, basically. And it was that kind of thing. You come out of the same pot, but everybody's lives, you go in different directions, or this way or that way or up here or down there. And that's how life is.
And so it sounds like your mom was very supportive of your singing, and she was very protective.
She was supportive. Yes, she was protective as well. She was very supportive. Once she saw that I had something, that I could really do something in the business as a professional singer, she stood by me and she helped out.
And all of this you were still in high school.
I was still in high school because I graduated from high school when I was 16. Mm-hmm. And then, speaking of contests, there was another contest that I entered when I was 16, and that was called Ted Mack's Amateur Hour. And at the time, Ted Mack was the talent contest. It was national. It emanated from New York, and so you had to go to New York. And what happened was, Ted Mack would be today like American Idol or The Voice or something like that. It was the big deal contest. So what happened was they were coming through auditioning people in Detroit, and I heard about it, and I went to the audition, and I was of course accepted. So they flew me and my mother, first class to New York, and put us up in the Sheraton Hotel. It was a big deal to me. That was a real big deal to me. And I didn't win first place. I won second place. But after that, I look around and I get a write-up in Jet Magazine, and I'm saying, how did they even know about me? So it just goes to show you that being on the boob tube, as they call it, sometimes is the best exposure of all. So even look at Jennifer Hudson. Case in point. She didn't win American Idol, but look where her career went. It's all about, because she had that exposure on TV, and that's how you got to find a way to become known. That's why nowadays it's different. We have in social media people becoming famous on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and some of these people, they're not singers or actors or dancers. They're just personalities, and they kind of get for some reason they get a following, and people like them, and they hold the interest of a certain portion of the public, and next thing you know, they're big time celebrities.
I don't understand it.
I don't either. It's like, okay, wait a minute, what happened?
Yeah. So I don't want to skip over everything, but you attended Detroit Institute of Musical Arts.
That was when I was a kid. Yeah.
Okay, so that was when you were much younger, because eventually you moved to New York City?
I moved to New York when I was 18, after I had finished high school.
And had you decided at that point that that you were going to be a singer, that you were going to pursue that as a career?
Yeah, I had
was
decided before that, actually, because I had also, in addition, I have to tell you that at the age of 17, I had an opportunity to audition for Duke Ellington. And I actually auditioned, he played for me in his hotel suite, and I sang. He played for me. I was introduced to Duke by his son, Mercer Ellington. Mercer Ellington had met a friend of ours who was our neighbor, who was an attorney in Detroit by the name of Alan Early Jr. And they met at a cocktail party, and Alan Early started telling him about this kid who was me, you know, that sings great, and that he would love for him to hear me. So he invited Mercer. They all came to our house, and I sang for Mercer. And Mercer said, "I want my dad to hear you." And it just so happens that the reason why Mercer was there in Detroit, Duke and the band were performing at a theater in Detroit I think it was called the Riviera Theater. And they were performing for several nights. And he said, I'm going to see if I can arrange for my father to hear Freda sing. And he did. And Duke played for me, and I sang. And he turned around and he said, "You know, you remind me of Lena Horne." And he said, "I want to hear you sing with the band." And he said, "The only problem is that we're leaving the next day, and we're driving to Pittsburgh." And he says, "We're performing. I'm booked at a club called." He said, "No, it's a hotel." He said, "It's a hotel called the Holiday House, and they have a club inside the hotel." And he said, "If your parents or someone can drive you or fly you, whatever, to Pittsburgh, I'd be more than happy to bring you up to sing." And so that's what happened. And it was my mother, and I had a mentor. His name was Mac Ferguson, and Mac Ferguson was a pianist, and he would work with me and kind of mentor me and play for me, and we did little gigs in around Detroit in like cocktail lounges. So Mac and I and my mother, we drove to Pittsburgh to the Holiday House. And of course, Duke brought me up and let me sing a couple of numbers. And then afterwards, and also during that time, I got to meet Billy Strayhorn, who was also there, staying there as well. And, Billy Strayhorn was a very famous songwriter.
Did you get nervous?
Of course I got nervous.
Okay, I don't know. You seem very calm.
Let me tell you, I was always nervous. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't even imagine.
And so when we got home, about a week later, we get a contract. Duke sent a contract. He wanted to sign me up for 10 years to sing as the band singer. Yeah. And so, of course, our attorney, our family friend, Alan Early Jr., went over the contract. My mother read it. He read it. And they wanted to change some things because I was 17. And this is to be traveling on the road with an all-male band. And by that time, I mean, I was like I said, I was I was fully developed. I was, And my mother would have had to go on the road with me because I was still considered a minor. And after quibbling and going over stuff with Duke, he didn't want to change anything. So that didn't happen.
So part of your story is like stubborn men not wanting to change contracts.
Right, that's right. Stubborn men not wanting to change. It's either their way or the highway.
Yeah. That's a big commitment, though, too. 10 years.
10 years is a lot.
Yeah.
I know. My mother said to Duke, Mr. Ellington, she said, "Mr. Ellington, what if you make my daughter a star after working, a few years working in your band? Would you adjust her salary?" He said, no. And that's something that we felt like, But you know what? I don't regret that one. I kind of regret Barry, because no one had any inkling of where he was going to go or where that company was. There was no Motown at that time, by the way, hadn't happened. But we had no inkling how successful he was going to become. It was like, oh, Barry, he's hustling, he's a songwriter. He used to work at Ford Motor Company, and he's just trying to get something going. And my mother was kind of like maybe suspicious of him anyway, because he was kind of like a playboy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which isn't a bad thing.
No, I mean, obviously worked out.
Yeah.
Well.
It worked out.
Yeah, he did okay.
He did great. He did better than okay.
Yeah. Yeah, could you just talk a bit about when you moved to New York City and you collaborated and were able to work with some, like the man I'm looking at right now at the picture.
Quincy.
Yep, Quincy Jones.
Okay, I was 18, moved to New York, and I had a room. I always had roommates in New York because I didn't, I was always thinking money-wise, how could I afford an apartment on my own? And at that time, I didn't think it was a good idea to have an apartment on your own, a young woman by yourself. So having a roommate was more like a safety thing as well. And it all worked. When I look back on it, it all worked out. I had a lot of fun and, hanging out. My first roommate was a registered nurse, Carol Preston, and we're still friends to this day. And I'm her daughter's godmother. So I remember Carol and we were going out, and back then, there wasn't any really good TV, so that you didn't want to just stay in the apartment watching TV, and the TVs sucked back then compared to now. Forget it. So we would go out because it was boring just to hang out in the apartment, and so I would go out in auditions and things like that to try to get a gig somewhere. And we went to this restaurant. It was on 48th Street between 8th and Broadway, and it was called Sapphires. And it was owned by an African-American guy by the name of Danny Sims. And it was it was like a popular place where some of the entertainers would come after their gig and hang out for a while, have something to eat. And we were there one night, and Danny came over to me and said, Freda, there's a guy over there I want you to meet. He says you guys might be able to work together, and he said he's going places, Quincy Jones. And so he introduced me to Quincy, and we wound up leaving there and going to a club. Back then, they had all these different little small clubs, and there was a trio playing, and Quincy said, why don't you get up and sing? And I did, and afterwards we talked, and then he invited me to work with his band.
So when you got to, was it pretty easy for you at the time in New York to make money and just kind of make connections and get gigs and jobs?
Well, that happened, yeah. I'm not going to say it was easy, but it happened because you got to get out there and you got to go and network and meet people and be seen. And like they say, I got to sing. If you're a singer, sing as much as possible. Get out there and sing as much as possible, and that's how you get discovered.
And how did you meet Pearl Bailey the same?
Oh, I almost forgot
way?
that.
Yeah, I love her.
So much happened when I was 17. Actually, when I auditioned for Pearl. When I auditioned, I was just about to turn 17, but I think I was still 16. Pearl Bailey was performing. She was in Detroit with her review. It was the Pearl Bailey Review. And they had put the word out that they needed an extra background singer because I guess one of the background singers either got fired or they just quit. And same thing happened. Our friend Alan Early Jr., who was our neighbor and a top attorney, by the way, he met a guy by the name of Bob Bailey at a party. And Bob Bailey, in conversing with Bob, Alan told him about me. And so Bob said, well, why don't you, we're holding auditions this week. I know she's young and she's never been out on the road, but just have her come down and audition. You just never know. I went to the audition, and I was the only person that auditioned who was an amateur. I mean, I was an amateur then. I hadn't become professional. And I won the audition. And then I was like 2 days later, I was on the bus. And we went to Cincinnati. We worked like a week in Cincinnati. And then after that, on the bus, we went to New York. We were at the Apollo. That was my first time working at the Apollo, was with Pearl Bailey. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we went to Washington, D.C. at the Howard Theater.
Let me think. I'm trying to think. So when you had moved to New York and you met Quincy Jones and you were singing, getting jobs, did you at that time intend to become a jazz singer? And how did you transition to more pop R&B?
Okay, here's the deal. The year was 1963. I actually recorded my first album in 63 on a jazz label called Impulse. Impulse was like being on Blue Note or Verve. They had artists on Impulse like John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, people of that ilk, jazz-wise, and you can't get any more jazz than that. And so I did an album, and it was all jazz. Big band. One side was big band, the other side was trio. And yeah, I'd have to get the album, but I'm trying to remember.
Is that the How Do You Say?
No, it's After the Lights Go Down Low and Much More.
Okay.
After the Lights Go Down More and Much More, and I had some legendary musicians on that, that album, playing behind me. So you might say that that's how I was into doing, I put it this way, standards, what you call jazz. I was into it like back then, in my early 20s. Early, like I'm talking about 20, 21. I was into it then. So it didn't just some people think it just started like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. No, it's always been there. Mm. I've always been a jazz singer.
Yeah. And then, so was your transition to pop R&B once you signed with Invictus?
Yes, it was.
Records?
Yes,
okay.
It was. Because after I did the Impulse album in 63, I was in Europe. I went to Europe for the first time in 65, and I did record an album over there, and it was in Stockholm, Sweden, and it was just supposed to be for Sweden or Europe. And after I had Band of Gold hits and all that, I started seeing that album in record stores saying Freda Payne in Stockholm, And anyway, that's the record business. So my next album was on MGM Records, and that was in 1966. It was called How Do You Say I Don't Love You Anymore? And that was produced by a guy by the name of Tom Wilson. The only pop song that I had on that album was You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' by the Righteous Brothers. And I did other songs like Yesterday, the Beatles, and another song called If You Love Me, Really Love Me. If you love me, really love me, let it happen, I won't care. And let's see, another song called San Juan, on a Caribbean island. It's a place I can't forget. I go on and on, da 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 da, and then it's San Juan, da 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 da. So I did songs like that. So I would say middle of the road, middle of the road.
I almost just started crying, and I have goosebumps, just so you know. Like, I can't believe it.
And then the title song was "How Do You Say I Don't Love You Anymore?" And that was a good album. It was a good album. And then I didn't. So then my next, that was 1966, and then after that came Invictus. I signed with them in 1968, 69. No, 1968. We start recording in 69. And then that's when my first single came out in 69. And it was called The Unhooked Generation. And that was a slamming track. Really was. But it didn't stick. So by 1970, February, they released Band of Gold. And then that was the one that stuck. And the reason why I went that direction is because I was doing okay. I was working in supper clubs. I never worked the chitlin circuit. You know, I was working in high-end supper clubs. And, you know, I made, I guess, decent money, not great money, but I kept feeling like, gee whiz, look at these other people. And I start looking at Diana Ross's career, and I said, other people, Dionne Warwick and Leslie Uggams, and I said, you know what? I need to do something to like escalate my career, to kind of move up the ladder. I need to get a hit record. And that's so when the opportunity came around, when I got connected with Brian and Eddie Holland and Lamont. By the way, I knew them all in Detroit before they even became famous producer-songwriters. And it was a natural. And they said, you know, we're starting our own label, and we just left Motown, and we'd love to have you with us. And so that's how it all happened.
And what were some pros and cons of having such an enormous hit like Band of Gold, and you're everywhere?
Well, the pros is that you are everywhere, and that everybody wants you, and that your money, you know, your price goes up. But like everything else, once your price goes up, you have more dividends to pay. You know, you're spending more money, you're paying more money for like airfares, hotels, you're buying more wardrobe because you can't be wearing the same thing all the time. You're paying commissions to management, you know, or agent and all that. So everything is relative. Like, you know, you hear these stories all the time, you know, about artists suing their record label and all that kind of stuff, or leaving a management team because they felt that they weren't getting anywhere, or that they weren't, you know, that they were, you know, maybe not really giving them all proper reports for salaries or what have you. So, you know, things like that happen. And your life becomes more, I mean, being that I was in my late 20s by that time. And then, you know, you start feeling, as a woman, you know, you have you have feelings and needs, and all that comes into play.
Feelings and needs, you mean like relationships and? Oh
yeah, relationships. You know, your personal life, and it's, you know, it's nice to be working and busy all the time, but then again, you know, you still have to have some kind of a personal life, you know, to make yourself, I mean, to be normal.
And what was the, once Band of Gold came out, I talked to people about touring a lot, and kind of how rigorous was the schedule once you had a hit like that? Like, did you tour all over the place? Did you have to make more kind of like appearances? And how much did you work compared to how often you were working before?
Well, I'll put it this way. It wasn't exactly as great as I thought it was going to be, because what I ran into was ineptness, and the musicians sometimes weren't up to par, because I had already been spoiled. I came from having a musical background and of training, having worked in the supper clubs, the high-end supper clubs. I had already, most of those bands were good musicians who could read and had experience. And then when you start working with these people who were into the R&B music, and some of them didn't have that finesse, they didn't have that ability to, they couldn't read music well. And I suffered through that. You know, it's just a reality. So like now when I work, I mean, over the years, I always demand, I say I have to work with guys who can read. And also, not just that they play great. I had an experience, this was back in the, was called, I think it was called Fat Tuesdays. It was a jazz club in New York. And this was back in the 80s. And I remember my agent, Abby Hoffer, and he said, he's no longer with us, but he said, oh, this guy is great. He's a great jazz pianist. I won't mention the name, but he said, oh, he records for this label and he's fantastic. I said, oh, good. And I come to him at the rehearsal. By the way, I was going to be opening that night, so the rehearsal with him was that afternoon. I put the music in front of him, and he start looking at it like this and start playing like, this guy can't play any better than me. He can't read. And then I said, can't you, aren't you reading the music? It goes like this, you know. And he said, well, I'm trying. I'm saying to myself, oh my God, what am I gonna So I get on the phone and I'm like screaming like, what? He might be the greatest pianist, but just like Earl Gardner, he was another famous musician, Earl Gardner. Earl Gardner was a very successful, popular pianist, jazz musician back in the day, but he couldn't read music. He was self-taught. So I called my agent and started saying, I'm screaming, what am I going to do? So he called up somebody that could read very well, by the way. They were like a professor of music, and they came down. Thank God they were available. And I can't remember the name of the guy now. Anyway, he rescued me, and I had a good opening, and he did the rest of the gig.
That's funny. Okay, this is when I get a little confused, because at some point you moved to Los Angeles.
Yeah. That was 1971.
Okay, so you were still with Invictus Records when you moved to
here,
LA.
Yeah, when I moved here.
Okay. Why did you make the move to Los Angeles, and when did you get involved in like acting and things like that too? Well,
actually, the acting part, I had actually done that before I even signed with Invictus. It was 1967. I was living in New York, and I was understudying Leslie Uggams on Broadway in a show called Hallelujah Baby. And I was the only understudy to go on. I went on 5 times. And that was a great experience for me. So I was acting in that. I was doing a lead role where there was acting and singing. And so I did that. And also I had a little bit part in a movie back in 1962 with Jerry Lewis.
Oh, do you?
It was called The Disorderly Orderly.
No way.
The Disorderly Orderly. I had one line, and I was this was early. This was like around 63. No, 64. 1964. Okay. That was like the first movie I was ever in, and Disorderly Orderly. And then Hallelujah Baby on Broadway, 1966. And then after that, I didn't do any acting until 73. I was in a movie. I got a call from Raymond St. Jacques, who was an actor. He's no longer with us anymore, and he was directing and also starring in a movie called The Book of Numbers. And he called me to be in that, and I did that movie. It's called The Book of Numbers, and I had a supporting role with him. And then after that, I'm trying to think what else. The Book of Numbers. And then I've done other movies too. I did an Eddie Murphy movie called Nutty Professor: The Clumps, and another movie. It was called Cordially Invited. The Divorce.
Is that more like fun for you to do, or?
It's just another avenue. It's just an extension of my career. These are other things that you can do. Mm-hmm. And so you asked me about movies, and what else did you ask me?
Just your move to LA, like why you decided to move to LA.
Okay. I came to LA because I was suing Invictus Records.
Oh, I did not know that.
That was the specific only reason I came to LA, because I had acquired a law firm called O'Melveny and Myers in Century City to represent me, and I was suing Invictus Records. And they said, Freda, while you're here, we want you to register to vote, get a California, do you have a driver's license? I said, yes, Michigan. Get a California driver's license and a residence. And I did it. And I mean, that was it, basically. And I just stayed, and I bought a house in 74. The lawsuit was settled around 72. We settled it. And and then that's when I signed with ABC Records, and that was around 74.
Why did you sue Invictus? I just thought you left the label and then went
No, I sued them because they weren't paying me my royalties.
And that was that still a relatively small label? Like, you hear the horror stories of large or major labels a lot, but you went from a small label run by people that you knew and then transitioned over to like ABC, Capitol, right?
Yeah, and then Capitol after that.
Yeah.
Capitol Records in 76.
I mean, how disappointing was that?
It was very disappointing because, I just hadn't envisioned all that happening. I just thought I would be respected more. And I think it was so funny because it's funny how people will downplay you or think they can do things unethical, not really thinking of who you are and your experience. And it was sort of like I felt more insulted by that than anything else. It's sort of like it'd be different if I'd never left Detroit. It would be like, okay, whatever, But like I lived in New York, I'd been to Europe, and spent time, and I had traveled a lot. So I knew, it was sort of like I knew better, and I knew that it was just wrong. It was just wrong.
Was that kind of treatment, do you think, just because Band of Gold got huge and you were successful, I mean, any like sexism, or like did you ever feel like you were treated a certain way because you were a woman in the industry in the 60s and 70s?
Absolutely.
I imagine it was more
and it probably
then.
Was, I don't know if it would have, if I was a man, I don't know, it probably would have been still a little kinky, but because I was a woman, and I think it had a lot to do with it. It was almost like you say, it's sexism, where they don't, like if you start telling a man or getting in his face about what should be done or what's wrong and what's wrong and what's right, and what you like and what you don't like, it's sort of like it reverberates. It sort of like comes back and smacks you in the face. So that's what it was.
Do you think, I mean, you've been in the industry a long time. Have things improved from your perspective?
Well, being that I've been sort of away from the forefront of what's going on with the millennials now, and it seems like it still could be going on, but on a different level. I look at the relationship of Jay-Z and Beyonce, and from the outside, it looks great. But who knows what's really going on the inside? But it looks great. You know, as a matter of fact, it's like better than anything I could have ever imagined back then. You know, and Beyonce, Rihanna, all these things that are happening now. It seems like artists are doing, once they break through that wall, they break through that ceiling. It's like there's no stopping them.
Yeah, then they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, well, not quite or whatever they want, but you know what I mean. It's like they're making a lot more money. They're becoming a lot more successful than artists were back in my time. And I think it has a lot to do with marketing. And also, from what I see, it's not so much about talent. It's about marketing, preparation, who's behind you. It's your team. It's who's behind you. And then, of course, we don't know how much of that these artists are actually getting. How much are they really in control of their careers and their lives? We don't know that. It's like, I felt like back then, I said, I want to own myself. I don't want somebody owning me, you know. And then maybe I was wrong, you know, because, you know, it's sort of like, where am I now? Just
like a legend.
Yeah, but still, okay, I'm a legend. So what? But at the same time, I'm just saying, I'd rather be a rich legend than a poor legend. Look at, I'll give case in point, Diana Ross. Diana, I think, has the best, she must have the best planetary alignment, or God must have given her mucho blessings, because everything she does seems to work out well. She married well. She got her career went up to the top. She married well. Her kids are doing great, you know. And I think some people just have that going. They're just, I put it this way: they're just anointed with stardust, more dust. And some people have the same talent or the ability, but then it just doesn't happen like that for them. I don't know what it is. I know people who are very frustrated and so unhappy, who are talented, but they just don't, it's not the careers aren't igniting. You know, and other people come along and it's like, all of us, it's like they're standing in the right place at the right time.
I can tell you that line has come up in almost like every single interview that
Really?
I've done. Yeah, the right place at the right time.
The right place at the right time.
Yep.
Like they say, lightning strikes. Mm-hmm. When lightning strikes, are you the one? Mm-hmm.
You married and had a child in the late 70s?
I got married in 76, December 1st, 1976, to Gregory Abbott.
Mm-hmm. How you were still working pretty consistently. How was it difficult for you to navigate like home, being a mother, being a wife with your professional life?
I managed it. And I see a lot of women now in the business and all kinds of careers that are having babies and managing, So, I mean, it was tough. As long as you can afford to hire some help, it really makes it easier. Mm-hmm.
And you've had a lot of like careers outside of music too. Like you talked a little bit earlier, acting and theater.
Mm-hmm.
How, you were still working pretty consistently. How was it difficult for you to navigate like home, being a mother, being a wife with your professional life?
It, I managed it.
And and I was thinking about this, in 1981 your son was probably like a toddler.
Yeah, he was.
Like
He was
4 or
born in
something.
77. He was
Yeah.
born in 77.
And you hosted a talk show.
I did. Today's Black Woman. Right.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work. I've heard a talk
Yeah, it
show.
is.
It's a lot
It is.
of work.
No, you have to do a lot of homework. You know, you have to read a lot. You know, and it's a lot of homework, and it's not something that's just an easy thing to do. And of course, it started in New York, and then we did quite a few segments in New York, and then they actually came out here on location, and we did some shows out here as well.
Was that your idea, or did someone approach you and say?
I had a manager by the name of Charles Huggins, and he was married and managed Melba Moore, and he's the one that set that up, got that connection for me with a guy named Charles Gerber, the producer, and wanted to know, was presented it to me. Did I want to do that? And he thought it was a great idea. And this was just before Oprah hit the scene.
Right.
Had I known how big talk shows were going to be, I probably would have fought to stick with it more. But it lasted 2 years. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then you just decided, you're like, ah.
Well, no, I just decided and then it just, things get canceled after a while. Yeah, but it lasted 2 years. I did it 2 years, 2 years, 81 and 82.
In the 80s, I had read that you were planning to concentrate more on acting than music. I don't know if that's true or not.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Acting would come into the picture intermittently. When something came up or if someone reached out to me to do an acting role. So it wasn't like I was actively, pursuing acting. Acting basically kind of came to me. However, I did enrolled myself into acting classes. And that was a good thing because I felt that I wanted to, kind of like keep myself well versed in that area, so that if I did have something come around, or I had to audition for, I'd feel more secure in my skills. And then 82 into 83, that's when I got booked to do Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies in Vegas.
Yeah, and you had, so I have like 82 you released in Motion.
In Motion came in, I think, was that in 82? Yeah, that was like 81, 82. In Motion, and that was sort of like a disco type tune. It was really a great track. Leon Silvers did the track, and Edmund Silvers produced it and wrote some of the lyrics.
What kind of musical choices did you make in the 80s and 90s? Like, did you deliberately kind of move away from Band of Gold R&B style pop? Did you want to do different
Yes,
things?
I did. I deliberately did it because, and it may not have been, I don't know, it may not have been, let's say, the wisest thing to do. You would think that once you got a really big hit like Band of Gold that resonated, million seller and all that, and rated highly on the charts, that you would kind of stick with that format. But the thing is that it was almost like I got a hit by accident. It was like I wanted to get a hit, but it was to help my career. And that's what I got. Let's say, be careful what you wish for. So I got that. But then I was identified as a soul R&B singer, but I really wasn't. I was like a jazz singer, and but I was able to transform myself into that, and I could do it, and I did it. I thought I did it well, and I could have continued doing that. but I felt like I wanted to be true to myself and also be happy, in performing, be happy in my professional and my personal appearances, And I found that when I did that, the audiences who came to see me, they were fans, of Band of Gold and Bring the Boys Home. And they were they wanted to hear those songs. But when I did my other songs like standards or anything like that, they enjoyed that as well. But the big smiles came across their faces when I got to Band of Gold.
Yeah, and
Bring
how
the
does
Boys
it feel?
Home.
Oh, I'm sorry. How does it feel now? I know that you, in 2009, you did American Idol. So when you do those larger appearances, like TV appearances, it's younger kind of generations that know you from Band of Gold. Are you okay with that, or are you?
Well, actually,
happy?
it's the baby boomers who know me from Band of Gold, because they were like kids. We were all, they were in their 20s and some in their teens when Band of Gold became a hit. And but at this also, those same people, their kids, they would play these songs around the house, and their kids would become fans as well. So, and then nowadays, I mean, even to this day, on those retro radio stations, the ones like Soul Town and The Groove, and those radio stations, Sirius XM, they play Band of Gold, and they play a lot of the songs from the 60s and the 70s, And I actually, like when I'm in my car here in LA, you're in your car a lot, So I'm able to, I do have Sirius XM radio, so I listen to Soul Town and The Groove. And then I can, let's say if I get bored, I get tired, and then I switch over to real jazz and watercolors. Watercolors is smooth jazz.
In the 90s and then going into the 2000s, you've consistently recorded, you've collaborated with other people. In the 80s, you did the Band of Gold remake with Belinda Carlisle. In the 90s, you performed with Darlene Love, released that album. So you've consistently been releasing music and performing.
Yes.
What have been some highlights for you?
Oh, well, one of my standout memories is that of when I was contacted by Michael Feinstein and his manager, Alan Svierdorf, to do a collaboration to bring together me and Darlene Love to do an act, and it was to be called Love and Pain. And it turned out to be quite an experience because we had rehearsals. I think we had rehearsals for about a couple of weeks at his house, and it was like we did a few numbers where we were both doing duets together and maybe singing, a song. Like she'd sing a song, I would open up with a song, All Is Fair in Love, and then she would go into a song for you, and then we come together and intermingle, and it turned out to be quite wonderful. It was very well received. We rehearsed it here, and then we performed it in New York at Michael Feinstein's club that he had in New York, located inside the Regency Park Hotel in New York. And Feinstein's at the Regency. So that was back in 2002, and then we also performed it here in LA at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel and the Cinegrill Room. Yeah. And of course I performed with Darlene many other times. Philadelphia at the Kimball Center, the Jerry Blavitz Show, and I performed with her in New Jersey. She has an annual Christmas show that she does in December, and I've done that a couple of times. So, yeah.
You talked earlier about coming off of a hit like Band of Gold, which was a big pop R&B mainstream hit, but then wanting to remain true to yourself as an artist and to kind of be your true, authentic self, I guess. So how, in late 90s to 2000s, when you started doing more jazz and standards, were those deliberate decisions on your part? Like,
it was a way, when I started doing more jazz, also, mind you, I'm getting older and maturing more, and I'm thinking of, hey, I can't compete with these, 20-year-olds and, these girls in their late teens and all that. I said, I've got to kind of like go to a place where I can appeal to more adult type minds, or people in my age bracket that might appreciate, let's say, more jazz music and standards at that point. So I was kind of evolving. And then let me tell you this, another thing. Back when I first got Band of Gold, I used to work places like the Copacabana in New York. Now, mind you, even Diana Ross, but of course Diana had Barry Gordy Jr. behind her, and that was the machine. And Diana, when she did her nightclub acts, she was doing jazz material as well. She was doing, but then again, she had so many hits that it made it more palatable and, let's say, acceptable for her to surge ahead in terms of her career. But Diana Ross also did, standards as well. She intermingled. In other words, she gave you a variety. If you went to see her in Vegas, she gave you a variety of music.
Okay, well, I wanted to talk a bit about, you talked a lot about Ella Fitzgerald in the beginning part of your interview, and then we've come full circle. In 2014, you released, or you performed as Ella Fitzgerald in First Lady of Song.
That was in 2004.
That was in 2004?
I've done it 3 times. So it was, the first time I did it was in 2004 when Maurice Hines called me and said, Freda, there's a theater in New Brunswick, New Jersey. It's called Crossroads. And he said it's a regional theater, and they want to produce Ella Fitzgerald, First Lady of Song, booked by Lee Summers. And I'm calling you to offer you the part of Ella because I feel that you sound so much like her and that you can really do this role. And of course I said, okay, I'll do it, And I went to New York and we rehearsed, and then New Jersey, and then I opened on 2000. I think it was December of 2004, and then in 2014, he calls me again to do it at a place in Alexandria, Virginia, a theater. It's called Metro Stage, another regional theater. And he offered me the role again. He says, want to do it again? And of course I said, of course, yes. I said, that's my heart, she's my heart. And that's really what I really want to do. So there you have it. And of course, then again, I just recently performed it for the 3rd time. And each time we do it, the script is tweaked a little bit, changed around. This time, I think they changed it around more than ever. And they included the role of Ella as a young girl when she auditioned at the Apollo, and they brought in another actress to do young Ella, and then I was doing Ella from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And in the beginning, when I first did it in 2004, I was doing the whole thing. I was doing young Ella as well.
Well, that's a lot of work. It must be kind of nice to only have to do one Ella.
No, I did it. I mean, back then, I did it. And was happy to do it. I just had to act like a little girl. Yeah. So I just used my little girl voice. That's all.
And if you could just talk a bit about what you've been doing the past couple of years.
What have I been doing? Oh, you know what I've been doing? The last few years, I go, and I work in the UK. Well, my late friend, David Guest, who passed away in 2016, I was going over to the UK a lot. And I would do shows with that David had produced, with Peebo Bryson and like Denise Williams and Sheila Ferguson, various art. Oh, the Stylistics, Russell Tompkins Jr., and the Temptations, Dennis Edwards, who has now left us. The late Dennis Edwards, his Temptation group. Billy Paul, oh my God, he's gone too, but it was Billy Paul, and a lot of great performers, Eddie Floyd, and, oh boy, Kim Weston, Martha Reeves. So I also work with people who are strictly R&B artists, but I have to change and adjust my repertoire to that. So I'll do something like I Will Survive, or I'll do How Sweet, I'll do a couple of Motown tunes, like How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. And then, of course, I do my hit, Band of Gold, Bring the Boys Home. And then there's another hit that I had that was charted over there called Deeper and Deeper. And that's what I do.
Do you feel like you have received like the credit that you deserve?
Well, I don't. I'll tell you what, I feel that I have been kind of cheated partially of receiving the credit that I truly deserve. And it may be partly my fault, because maybe I have refrained from having, let's say, the proper management. And that came from not having the greatest relationship with my record company, Invictus Records, back in the early 70s. During that time, I became disgruntled with them, and I sued them because they weren't paying me my royalties. And that kind of threw a wrench into our relationship. And also, they had a management as well connected to the company, and it kind of like soured me against managers. Then of course I did have a manager after that, and then sometimes maybe it's not fair to blame it on that, but I do. I think that maybe it's because I never really had the proper management.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier when you were talking about Diana Ross, the kind of, if you're in the industry, the importance of having the machine. The
right machine behind you, And I mean, bless her. Let me tell you, I guess she was born under some lucky stars. But and then she had the ability and the talent to go with it. But there are a lot of artists out here. There are a lot of people who are really talented, and they just don't get the right direction, or they don't get the right representation sometimes. And I guess you have to be in the right place at the right time, when lightning strikes. So, because nowadays it's fame and stardom does not equate along with talent, true talent. It's sort of like you can just be, let's say, a person who has puts out some videos or you can maybe just display yourself and in a very, let's say, in a provocative way, not really being talented, but just being beautiful and having a beautiful body. And all of a sudden it goes all over the internet or whatever, and all of a sudden that makes that person very popular, and they're able to correlate that with good conversation or interesting foreplay, so to speak. And next thing you know, you've got a giant mega star, and it works for some people. I'm not knocking it. It works for some people. Nowadays, it's just a matter of having good PR and exposure, and not necessarily being a really talented singer or a talented actress or a talented orator or anything like that, but just being, let's say, getting out there and having the ability to just connect with people, period.
That's true. Yeah, I feel like you have to kind of be an exhibitionist in a way too. You need to be willing to just be out there all the time.
Yeah, exhibitionist. In other words, an extrovert. Just being an extrovert and getting out there and just doing silly things, or doing something that somebody would look at and say, I wouldn't do that, but I'm going to watch it.
What are you most proud of personally and professionally?
Oh, God. What am I most proud of? I can say that I'm proud of some of the Lifetime Achievement Awards I've been given. Lifetime Achievement Award from the Urban League in St. Louis that I received last year, and Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Music Association, things like that. I'm very proud of those.
You're in the R&B Hall of Fame too?
Oh yeah, the R&B Hall of Fame. Yeah, I'm proud of that. Yes.
What do you want people to know about you that they might not know?
That I'm very shy. That oh well, they may not know. Oh, I love food. I love good food. They may not know that because some people think because I'm not, I haven't blown up and I'm not overweight, that they might think, oh, you probably don't eat that much, or you're a vegan, or and you really watch what you eat. And I say, oh, I eat everything. I eat everything. I eat desserts, candies, cookies, cakes. Not that much. But and then I eat meat. I eat pork, beef. I love seafood. I eat everything in moderation. Mm-hmm.
And then if I fly back to Massachusetts and say, "Oh, I didn't ask Freda Payne this thing."
Oh well,
then I'll just have to
I only had one child. I was married once. I don't think we ever talked about that. I was married back December 1st, 1976 to Gregory Abbott, and we had a son in 1977, Gregory Abbott Jr., and then we divorced in 1981. Actually, it was 1980 it was actually 1980, but it came finalized in 81. And in 86, Gregory went back to New York, where he's from, and he wound up getting a record deal with Columbia Records, and he wound up having a #1 hit record that he sang on, produced, and he wrote. It was called "Shake You Down," and it was #1 on Billboard, and it was #1 on the pop chart and the R&B chart at the same time. So he achieved something huge back then.
Did you keep in touch, or?
Our relationship is, we don't keep that closely in touch, but now and then we run across one another. Yeah.
Well, and you don't have to answer this if you don't like it, but I do ask people sometimes, did you find it difficult as a woman, just as a working woman, to maintain relationships or romances, personal relationships like that?
Well, that's the juicy stuff. I can't say it was difficult. I have to just say that a lot of the relationships I had, including my marriage, I guess it did interfere, it didn't contribute to longevity. Now, when I see people like Billy Davis Jr. and Marilyn McCoo, who've been married forever, and they're still together, And they work together. And they're together like peas in a pod. And, you know, you have to look at them and say, well, they did it. And I'm extremely happy and proud of them because they're great people on top of it. They're nice people. And who else do I know that stayed married for many years? Well, they're the ones, because I know them. We're friends, you know, so I can refer to them. But it is kind of hard. It really is, because personally with me, you get into a relationship, you're in love. I am in love, rather, and then you find out that it's not quite what you thought it was going to be, or the person is not quite who you thought they were, you know, and then it kind of, you know, dissipates, or the relationship is terminated by one person or the other. And it is difficult for me because sometimes my son says to me, Mom, why aren't you married? You know, why can't you stay in a relationship? And I said, Gregory, whenever you wait till you fall in love and get involved in a relationship, and then you come and ask me that. But life is strange. Sometimes you get lucky and you meet your soulmate, you know, right out the box, you know, like from right out of college or high school or whatever. And then other times you don't. So it is difficult.
Your son says that to you now, still?
Yep. Even now, still says it.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that was the only other. I wanted to ask that last time, but I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting. It comes up a lot. It's not like a normal career to be in, and at the time, in the 70s, too.
I know. But then you look around, I see, like when I'm watching TV, I'm watching these Access Hollywood, Extra, Entertainment Tonight, and they interview these, you know, the millennial people who are like actresses, and they're like, you know, they meet somebody, and it's almost like a PR thing where one person and like two people who are really popular right now in the business, they get together, and then they maybe hook up, they get married, and the next thing you know, in about another couple of years, it's over. You know, so that's what I'm talking about. You know, it's difficult. It really is. It really is. And then, of course, having kids too, that is not the easiest thing. That's why I look at somebody like Jennifer Lopez or Mariah Carey. They both have twins, by the way. You know, isn't that something? I thought it was really rare to have a twin. I don't know, they've been messing with in vitro fertilization or something. But anyway, it's nice to have, you know, get pregnant and have two at the same time. But, you know, you wonder how to, you know, I'll tell you what, it's harder on the kids. It's harder on the kids because kids really resent it when you're not spending like constant time with them. And how I know that, I go back to my childhood. I remember once my mother this was when I was like probably 6 or 7, and my mother went away on a vacation to New York. I'm from Detroit. She went to New York on a vacation for 2 weeks. Do you know, we never, you know, that impacted us. You know, we felt that she had abandoned us just because she went on a vacation. But other than that, she never did. After that, she never did. She would always take us. We would have a summer cottage up in northern Michigan, and we'd all go together, you know. So now when you think about kids whose parents are on the road and traveling or constantly working, and they hardly ever see their parents, it impacts those kids. I don't care if they have a nanny, housekeeper, or what, but it does affect the children.
Once you had your son and you were a working mother, did you make decisions so that you would be around for him?
I tried as hard as I could. I tried. There were times when I would go out, like I would have a gig, you know, a job, and I would go away, and I couldn't just take him everywhere, you know, but I would leave him with the housekeeper, you know, the housekeeper nanny, and I'd be gone maybe a week. And then, of course, my sister, you know, his aunt, my sister Sherry, she would come and help out if she was in town. She would come in and help out as well. But it doesn't. I think it does. The kids do feel like they've been abandoned when the parent is not there constantly, and it's hard. Like they say, sometimes some women even quit work and stay at home just to raise their kids. And those women, I think, they need to really be rewarded because they've sacrificed. But the benefit is that they're giving all their time to their children.
All right, as someone who has performed and been in the public eye for over 50 years, how do you feel you've changed or evolved as an artist?
Well, I think that I'm better. I'm more relaxed. I'm more sure of myself. I have more of a better understanding of lyrics that I sing than what I had before. The downside is that you say I've been in the business over 50 years. The downside is that physically, I'm not 25, 35, 45, or even 55 anymore, and that I'm beginning to experience things in my body, whereas before it was like, oh, well, I can leap tall buildings at a single bound. And now it's like, oh my God, my knees. But other than that, it's okay. My vocally, I'm good. My voice is about the same as it was before. As long as I vocalize. Yeah. And I think the only difference is that you just kind of like you're dealing with the aging process, but the talent is still there. A lot of my contemporaries, as they age, their voices actually change or they get deeper, and then of course a lot of that has to do with them being smokers, and the voices aren't quite as, let's say, they don't have the same pitch that they used to have. So, and they say that as you age, they say that women our voices get deeper, and men they become more feminine as they get older.
I didn't know that about men.
Oh, yeah.
But I just thought, yeah.
Oh, yeah, if you study or you read about the hormones and all that kind of stuff, that's what happens.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Men have less testosterone after the age of in their 40s, and then it gets less and less, and then women, I think, become more, I don't know, I won't say masculine, but the voices get a little deeper. Yeah, and as they get older.
Yeah. And okay, I'll ask this one. What are your thoughts on the visibility of women in rock or pop history? So not people currently, but what are your thoughts on the visibility of women in rock and pop history in general? Is there a gender discrepancy? Or is it something that's changed for better or worse since you started, as far as who's remembered?
I think that some of them who are still around, or even the ones who aren't as active as they were, like a Tina Turner. I don't think Tina Turner is like, so iconic. I don't think her image will ever change. I don't think she's touring anymore, though. I think the last time I saw her was in the UK. And that was like around, like maybe, like 2009 or 10 in the UK. And she was, my God, she was running up and down. She was running up and down up in the air. And she was, it was like she was 25, There was no difference. She put on a fantastic, terrific show. And so, like, Tina is now, like, in her late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's 78 or 79.
About 79.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I haven't heard of her doing any touring lately, but I can understand, if she doesn't want. But look at the Rolling Stone. Those guys still go out now and then, I think.
all the time.
Yeah, and they're like grandpa, great grandpas.
And how do you feel about your role in and contribution to music history?
Well, I feel that now I'm at this point in my life that I feel that I've done some significant work. I've done some really good musical work. I know for the people who are still around, who are my fans, they've appreciated it. And then I'd like to get new fans as well.